dissent. So we come now to item number 10. Thank you very much to our officers, and when I say thank you to our officers for the last item, our legal people have put hours and hours of work into this, as well as our staff focused on the policy aspects, and do want to acknowledge their enormous efforts. So item number 10 is about the meeting of the Local Government New Zealand conference in Blenheim and the AGM, I think in July, 15th to 17th of July. And what we're trying to do here is work out how we're going to get, how many people we want to send down and which people we might choose. And council officers have provided some very clear advice on that. To put the motion on the record, I'll move it and ask for a seconder. Councillor Pippa Coombe, and welcome Elodie Fontaine and Rose Leonard to the table. And Rose, are you leading? Yeah.
Today we're asking you to make a decision as a governing body about your attendance at the LGNZ conference in Blenheim on the 15th and 17th of July, and to appoint your AGM delegates. Today you can make decisions about your own attendance for your governing body members, and you can decide to send less people if you wish. The option we've recommended was within the significantly reduced budget allocated to Kura Kawana, your elected member development budget, for conference attendance. Some local boards have very strong views about the importance of attendance at this conference, and I've taken into consideration when recommending this option to you that there is a wide range of opinions across local boards, but also across yourselves. The option, that's why we've chosen that option, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. If I can just add, I've put up another chair's recommendation there, which takes into account of what Rose has just said. I think it would be an incredibly bad look if, you know, probably as many as, 40 people turned up at an AGM at the cost of tens of thousands of dollars. Kind of be contradictory to all the messages we've been sending out about the need to constrain our expenditure because of the emergency and the recovery budgets. So we've nominated 6 people, and they've all been nominated on the basis of the ongoing role they play within Local Government New Zealand. That seemed to be a logical criterion. We have not set out in the recommendations what the local boards should do, simply because we don't have the power to do that. Nevertheless, I know the local boards kind of look forward to this, and we usually have 21 delegates going down there from the local boards. My chair's recommendation is simply to say we recognise that you have the authority to send who you wish and the number you wish to the conference, but please take into account the circumstances in which we and the community find ourselves in the COVID era. I don't think we can go beyond that, but I do think it's worthwhile making that statement from this body. So I'd commend that additional resolution to you, and we'll now take questions on it. And I'm just...
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, it's a seconder. Can I just ask, I've got a query about that addition.
I've got you on my question list. Would you like to raise?
Wait for the question, but I'm just not sure why that's needed in the context of the report, and I'd just like to ask a question about...
Okay, I'll take that question at that point, and but I have got a list here, and I'll just take it in the order that I've got it. So we begin with Councillor Desley Simpson. Question, please.
Thanks, Your Worship. My first question is to the Chief Executive, and that is why, when we're in emergency budget and we're doing the must-dos, not nice-to-dos, did a paper manage to get here through the system that didn't put up the most cost-effective option as an officer recommendation? There's $15,000 difference.
Thank you, Councillor. what we've done here is tried to arrive at a recommendation that strikes the balance between the affordability as well as the importance of our representation at what is really the most important local government conference in New Zealand. And given the size and scale of Auckland, you know, we took a view, our team took a view that it is important that we send adequate representation, but recognised that we had to work within the affordability parameters of our budget, and our budget was reduced from last year down to this year of, I think it was around 40,000, and so we've made a recommendation within the budget that we had allowed for, but a recommendation at the same time that represents the importance of Auckland's role in local government in New Zealand.
Okay, so I would reserve my right to speak, but my second question is, maybe to you, why do we actually, we've got 4 people that we need to send to the AGM, is that correct? Why can't those 4 people be our representatives, full stop? Why do they need extra people to help them for the rest of the conference?
Through the chair. The AGM just represents the one part of the conference, and there is value in the attendance of the rest of the conference. And I was wanting to strike a really balanced attendance across GB and local boards. You could decide as a body to send fewer people if you wish.
Right, thank you. My next question, just 2 and then I'll wait and then come back to me if you've got time. My next question is, what if anything are we saying to local government New Zealand about the ability that we should be in these tough times for every council in New Zealand? I mean, boy, you think our rates rises are steep when look at everybody else's. What message are we giving to them that they should provide some of this opportunity online or in a different way? Because they make a lot of money out of this conference. And that's a question I hope somebody at the AGM asks them specifically, how much do they earn from these conferences? I've read their annual report, I hope you have, but please ask that question at the AGM. So what are we doing about that?
Through the chair, the team have been in constant, I would say, conversation with LGNZ about the situation that we find ourselves in, and many, as you say, many other councils, and they are considering options for if COVID lockdown occurs and if we need to defer the meeting or put it online, but so far they've not given us any advice about taking this to an online conference or to just laying out the conference in a different way or holding it biannually or anything like that. So we will keep you posted of that, but so far we've received no advice from them on that.
We doing to ask them to accept that more? Yeah. And then my final question, just for the moment, I have more, but I'll leave it for now, is in this really tight time for everybody, how can you help me explain to ratepayers of Auckland that this is an absolute must-do?
Through the chair, I would just say that many elected members find value in being with other elected members around the country who are facing similar issues. And that is the value for those members who attend. That is why many want to attend. In fact, many might want to send more people and have in the past. So I think that the message to constituents would be that we have really significantly reduced this budget and our costs and have arrived at a balanced attendance across GB and local boards.
Thanks. I mean, in some ways those questions, Councillor, are political for us to determine, understand exactly where you're coming from. I would just make this one other point. Auckland is a third of the population of this country, and we presumably could be represented by having a third of the delegates at the conference, which would give us, you know, theoretically 60 or 70 people that would attend. We're talking about 6 people coming from this body, our problem, my preference actually would be, I hate conferences. I'd rather do it online. We had a very successful online conference, Councillor Coombe. Actually, when I say very successful, the content was good, the technology was appalling, and that might answer your question as well. But there is a bit of a feeling around the country that because we're big, we're arrogant, we're dismissive of what everybody else thinks. And if we send 3 people down, that would be seen as an arrogant statement of disregard for the body of councillors that make up local government New Zealand. So, yep, we need to be careful in our expenditure. You and I are both strong advocates of that. But I think we've found a balance here where we have a limited number of people going down who will participate because they are involved in the organisation, and it's an indication that we stand alongside the colleagues around the rest of the country. But the more we could do online, the other answer is, from my point of view, the better. Thank you for that. Councillor Kathy Casey.
I have a question about remits and the timeline on remits. Yesterday we had an excellent presentation from Auckland Transport, and the Mayor has already written a letter to Minister Salisa with regard, Porter Williams, with regard to the advocacy points that they raised yesterday. According to the report, have we missed the deadline? Because I would really like to see those advocacy points enshrined with our delegates to go before LG&Z. Also parking, what did you say yesterday, Chris, about parking? Can I just get confirmation that we're not too late to do that?
No, we're not too late. It's my understanding. We've got plenty of time, but Rose, you might have the timeline.
We've got until 14th of May. We can put additional remits in.
Excellent. And just for the record, I've only been to Local Government New Zealand Conference once, and that was to fight for LG&Z support for a ban on the private sale and use of fireworks, and we won that debate. But I'm with Desley. I think in this current climate, we should be paring it back to the absolute minimum, because it is a bad look. It's still seen as a junket by people out there.
Thank you, and it was a very successful speech, Councillor Casey, which indicates actually the value of you being there and our delegation getting behind it, because that was actually a bit of a turning point, I think, for local government New Zealand. But look, for remits, I mean, we don't go down there, to enjoy the vineyards of Blenheim. We go down there to participate in the conference. We should put our remits up, and I would invite every councillor to think of what you might like to see come positively out of that. And I think Councillor Casey has made a very strong point about the enforcement of our drink driving and speeding as a way of getting to Vision Zero. So certainly encourage councillors to put forward remits for that. Councillor Pipacoon.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Kia ora koutou. Just in terms of the local board decision making, so they haven't made it yet that they're only willing to send one person per, or the formula that you're recommending.
The paper is currently going through local boards at the moment, so some have made resolutions and some have not yet considered the matter. Through the chair, sorry. Some are happy to accept our recommendations and will be participating in the process to decide on 6 additional members. Others are not happy and have been will be using their individual development budgets as they are permitted to do under the policy.
And just some points of just additional bits of information, I guess. The conference is taking place in our recess week, isn't it? So it's not going to interrupt any council business, and the AGM is on the Saturday following the 3 days, so it's actually quite a big commitment to stay on for the AGM as well. And another question I had too was, could I just answer the question about the remits, because there is actually a slightly different take on that, because I would like to comment and speak in support, but just in terms of answering that question about the remits, the other side of it that's being discussed at National Council is that remits are not actually a very good way of developing the policy of local government, And they've got a huge workload. There's so much going on when you think about the Three Waters reform, RMA reform, all just huge amounts. So to have these remits pop up that can be very random is not actually a very good way of developing that policy. And also, as Auckland Council, I mean, I very encourage everybody to think about remits, and I think that happened at the Auckland Zone and coming through local boards. But Auckland Council hasn't traditionally used that as a tool to try and leverage our advocacy, because we are big and ugly and can do it ourselves in some ways. So I do just caution that about the remit process. The one area I think that we could be maximising our visibility is around, we've never ever won a major award at the conference. Just a few minor projects, and that's because we haven't put things forward. We haven't used the nominations, and I know that's something that local boards are keen to do more of. So hopefully that there have been nominations that have come through, because we've got some fantastic projects and successes that could be showcased. So that was sort of answering some questions, but I would like to be able to speak in support at the right time as well, when I get that opportunity. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Just to clarify, I understand the point about remits, but I think we're still working on the remit system, aren't we? Having 60 or 70 separate remits and minimum period of time to speak to them is a bit of an exercise in futility. So it might make more sense if we structured our debates, but as I understand it, and this is a question, we are still working on the basis of them considering remits rather than changing the format of the conference. Is that correct or not?
That's my understanding of it.
And you can't provide, there's been no shift in policy from your attendance at the last meeting of they're still considering remits rather than restructuring it?
Oh, absolutely. It's just been raised as an issue that this is actually getting a bit out of control, because all councils are getting really excited about doing as many remits as possible, and so it's becoming really unwieldy. And as you know, we did that online, having, I think it was about 30 remits to work through, vote on online. Some are cold out on the way through, but it's really getting more and more each year.
Okay, no, thank you for that.
But yes, it is still going through the process.
Thank you for that clarification. Councillor Daniel Newman.
Look, you kind of addressed this in relation, because it goes to Jay. I attended a Papakura local board meeting last night. I understand that the advice that's been given to local boards is that they will have they nominate somebody to go forward for their sort of sub-regional clusters, where a person from that cluster will be voted on to be the cluster representative. So what are there, 4 clusters plus rurals?
Through the G, yes, so 6 in total.
Yeah. So, Your Worship, I understand Jay. I just really am not sure if it necessarily adds a lot of value, given that the boards are acting. I observe the boards acting on the advice that's been given, and I think that those boards are very conscious of the financial situation that we face. So, Your Worship, I don't want to speak in opposition to a chair's recommendation, but I just wonder if Jay is appropriate under the circumstances. I think the boards, to a greater extent, do understand this, and they're acting accordingly.
Yeah, that'd be great if that is the case, Councillor. I think, though, what we're doing is sending a message to the public as well. If somebody's following this and saying, huge delegation allowed by council to go to conference on the back of the ratepayers' dollar, we're just making the statement, which is an obvious statement, I guess, and that's your point, that we all need to be concerned in the current environment, and that's why we'll probably have lesser representation than normal. I would hope, and I think we've heard from officers that a lot of the boards are taking that on board. Some may not be. Councillor Wayne Walker.
I just really wanted to speak to the comments that Councillor Simpson was making. What's that? Can't hear.
Sorry, we were just waiting for your question, Councillor.
Sure. So my My question is around remote attendance. I would have thought that this would have been something that local government New Zealand would have been actively promoting. It would enable more engagement. It's a better geographical fit for a place like New Zealand. It goes to resilience. So I'm quite staggered that there doesn't appear to be much information around that. So I would put it by way of a question, can we have that as a remit so that we actually advance remote attendance to these conferences?
I don't believe that would fall within the remit criteria, Councillor Walker, but rest assured that we are really working to help LGNZ understand our position on this, on remote attendance being highly desirable. They will make videos of the conference, keynote speeches, etc. available after the conference, but the point you're making is a good one. We will continue making that.
Thank you. Councillor Linda Cooper.
Thank you. My question is, I mean, this is in the individual development budget, but to me it doesn't, I don't understand. To me it's not professional development. This is representing Auckland on important things. Run the AGM of an organisation, so that's not development, and also working on things like remits, going to government. I don't see it as professional development. So because that actually limits then any other opportunities. If there might be something that would really be professional development for an elected member, would we not have a budget that, you know, I mean, I don't understand why we put it there, and would there be a better place to put it, maybe in future, or another kind of budget that this could come out of? Because I actually do think having to pay, I mean, I really commend people saying they'll pay $900 each, you know, on top of this. It's quite an undertaking to do something that for your work. If you didn't work here, if you weren't an elected member, you would not be doing this. It's clearly work. It's not individual professional development.
Yeah, I think Rose is looking at me on that one. I understand what you're saying, Councillor. I mean, I think there is an element of learning in the attendance. It's one view of individual development. It's perhaps been somewhat reluctant to use the word opportunistic as a way of getting people down there. But I think for those that have attended conferences, I mean, if you're an old hand at it, yeah, there's probably not much learning. But if you're new to local board or new to the governing body, you get to learn a lot, not simply through the formal sessions, but the chance to meet, discuss and develop ideas with others. So it may not be a perfect basket to fund it from, but that's the way that it's been done, I think, over a long period of time, Rose. Is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Just to be really clear, the Kura Kawana budget, which is your elected member development budget covering GB and local boards, has a conference element and the separate IDB budget. So the conference element was reduced significantly, and also the IDB for each of you individually, the allocation was halved in line with the professional development budgets of staff being halved through the emergency budget situation. So we have a conference budget sitting within Kura Kawana, which is $40,000, and we have halved the IDB budget.
So the other question, if you don't mind, Mr. Chair, is have we ever met, you know, actually filled the budget, used the budget? Because, I mean, last year, would we have? I mean, I don't, I mean, apart from using it for conference, for actual professional development.
If you've got that information, Rose.
Well, in a very broad sense, last year, because the conference occurred online and it was only the Mayor and Councillor Coombs that went, there was very little cost. So there is a little bit of money in the kete from last year. So it's funded over an electoral term for 3 years. So there is a little bit of money in the kete.
What I'm saying is, though, without a conference, even in normal times, would we actually meet that? I think I've only accessed it once in my 7 I think this is my 8th year. 7th year.
I would have to go back and look for more
I
information.
just wonder, because if
yeah.
we're only really using it, it's a bit, to me, it's a little bit misleading to say we're using that if, for a lot of us, we're not using it at all. Only, we use it for people to go to conference.
Yeah, I think it's a topic in its own right, not central to our discussions today, but how the individual development funding is used and whether there are better ways of getting better results out of it. Happy for that conversation to take place, but it's not integral to what we're doing today, but today's a good opportunity to reflect on whether we need to have a further discussion around that. Councillor Chris Darby.
Thanks, Mayor. Just going to the remits, I'd like to sort of pick up what Councillor Casey is focusing on. We did have an email from Rose inviting this some time ago, and there were about 5 attachments to that email, Rose, but it was pretty clear. And I think one of the problems I think that is happening at Local Government New Zealand is there's a plethora of remits coming in, and they actually a lot of them don't seem to satisfy the criteria of being of a national interest, critical matters of the moment. A lot of them appear to be a bit more localised, and therefore it's a lot of resource trying to sort of sift all this. So I would suggest that if we are lodging a remit, that we actually lodge the idea politically, but it needs to be progressed through our staff, and we need to narrow down what we think is really important. Now, having said that, picking up on the comments of Councillor Casey and yesterday's workshop, Vision Zero and Transport Safety, and some concerns that we are now very aware of, and your correspondence following that workshop yesterday, Mayor, which was excellent. And that is exactly reinforced in our ATAP resolutions, which we passed a week ago, and our strategy team has emphasised that as an area. So I'm hearing from a political place and a management place that there is a very important strategic matter that we probably need to be homing in on. So I would be encouraging of not just spilling a whole lot of ideas. Maybe we need to focus on those matters of foremost interest, which are also national issues, they're not just Auckland issues, as outlined in our ATAP resolutions, which was about transport safety and compliance, all the items that you were raising yesterday. So where I'm leaving this is probably with the Chief Executive to ask the relevant staff, Auckland Transport and strategy people, to work that up. If it just gets worked up by politicians, it'll be a muddle of words. The ideas have been generated, but they need to be worked up now by our management.
Thanks, Councillor. I think Local Government New Zealand itself has a winnowing process to work out because it can't cope with massive amounts. I said before, in answer to Councillor Simpson, we needed to be down there to show that we weren't being arrogantly dismissive of Local Government New Zealand. Equally, we don't want to totally dominate the time. Therefore, there's a limited number of remits that you can actually discuss. And I think maybe the people that we determine will represent the governing body down there need to go, send all your ideas in by all means, but we need to probably focus, as you've said, strategically on 2 or 3 matters that are of particular importance, and staff by all means could feed into that. But I would hope that elected representatives will just have a think about that. And it does need to be something that's not simply specific to Auckland. Otherwise, while we're taking it to our LGNZ, it's something that we want LGNZ to get behind our policy position on, to give it greater oomph when it comes to the government, because most of them are directed to the government. So I think your idea is a good one. I think the 6 people we determined to go down there will need to consider the remits, consider what are the strategically most important, and focus on that. And I think in previous occasions, we've divided up the speaking between the different the delegates that are there. So thank you for that comment. Councillor Sharon Stewart.
Thank you. I actually think Jay's a very good idea, because I can remember, I think the Christchurch one in 2018, of the 9 local board members for Howick, I think 7 or maybe 8 of them all went. And so I think it is important because they couldn't decide who, so they all, I think one was sick and maybe one was overseas on holiday. They all went.
Thank you, Councillor. I think we've all taken on board the message in that comment. Councillor Desley Simpson to finish on questions.
Sorry. Sorry about that. I wonder if the mover and seconder would consider another recommendation that those attending report back on the benefit that they have gained from attending this conference. It's not part of the recommendation, and I don't know why it isn't. I wondered if you would consider that, a memo or something collectively back to this committee.
Yeah, I think that's a very good idea because the conference isn't simply about 6 of the people that are chosen to go down to represent the council. It's about everybody. So we need to have a report. I thought I'd done one last time, Councillor Coon. Yeah. I think we need to highlight for the benefit of councillors what the key decisions were. I'm almost certain I did something last time because I remember going through it, and it's a good exercise for those that attend, and it's a good accountability back from those who attend to those that weren't able to attend, and a provision of information. So we'll most certainly do that, and thank you. That's I think I'm happy simply to say we probably don't need to move it formally, but we will report back to you, and you've made a good point. Councillor Chris Fletcher.
Thank you, Your Worship. And in the interests of consistency, because we very rarely at the governing body have a discussion about the role of local government New Zealand, my question is to Jim Stabeck, and it's a question that I have posed to his predecessors in Doug Mackay and to Stephen Town. As much as we play an important role in New Zealand in RFing our brothers and sisters within local government land, for the extensive costs that are associated by virtue of our membership, I have asked them and have never received a reply where the actual benefits lie in a policy sense, because the advocacy, because Auckland is so very different to other parts of New Zealand, so often it's representation to central government, it's representation that we need to undertake directly from Auckland because our interests differ. I don't want to be a party pooper in terms of people going and attending conferences, but I would really like some better understanding of the investment that we're putting into local government New Zealand, whether that then means that we can have fewer staff working in areas of policy formulation. So it's an open-ended question to you. I'm really interested in what the relevance is. I see it very much at local board land, and I don't want to interfere within that, but at a strategic level for this governing body, we haven't had a reasonably current discussion around local government's costs and relevance to us as a governing body, and I would appreciate your advice on that. Thank you.
Councillor, thank you. If I may take that question on notice, given my relative newness to the environment and the breadth of the question, if that's okay, if I could take that on notice.
Very much. Thanks.
Thank you very much. So we probably intermingled a little bit of comment with our questions in the last session, but if there's anybody that wishes to make comments in addition to what they may have had the opportunity to say so far, I've got Councillor Daniel Newman first, and then Councillor Desley Simpson.
Chair, if I could just ask that my vote be recorded against Jay.
Thank you. We'll note that. Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Look, I don't support these recommendations. If anything, I do support Jay, but I do appreciate that and believe that local boards at this time will consider the fact that we are financially challenged. But I believe that we should be at the table, but I don't believe we should be in the numbers that are suggested. I think we should have gone with the minimum, no more. Look, just because you've got budget, you don't need to spend it. We're in very tough economic times. It's okay to come in after budget, under budget rather. It's only okay to go over budget if you're talking about savings. I do just want to stress as part of my comment, I do want to stress that you ask LGNZ how much they make from their conferences, because I think that is the driver. I've had a look at the program, and I don't believe there is anything on the program by way of speakers, etc., that we can't access on our own. I think some of the remits would be helpful, but as I said, I do believe that we have that 2 people could do the job of 16. Last year we sent 2 people. We are not necessarily any better ahead financially. We're still going out there talking about being $1 billion short as a result of COVID, and then we've gone absolutely, in my opinion, over the line when it comes to spending on this. I'm not convinced of the benefits, and I absolutely think we need to report back, because everything we do at the moment should be must do, and we should be frugal in the way we spend it, and I just do not believe this meets that criteria. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Pivcoombe.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and I would like to speak in support of the officer recommendations and thank them for the work they've done on this. I think Councillor Simpson is asking exactly the right questions that we need to ask about the value for money that we get from the conference, and I think there's perhaps some things not quite been put on the table yet about that value that we do get. I do say this as a LGNZ geek. I do appreciate that I have been very entrenched in LGNZ now for a decade and worked very hard to get local board representation around the table, to get the changes to the Constitution and to make our membership relevant. There's a lot of sensitivities at LGNZ around, will Auckland maintain our membership? We are a third of, obviously, of councils, 78 councils. Every council is a member. We don't pay a third of the membership fees because that was negotiated down. But I do believe we get, they work very hard on our behalf, and it's very important for us to have a membership body that is fronting for us in Wellington. And the advocacy I see is quite phenomenal, and it would be good, and thanks Councillor Fletcher for asking that question, because I think it is timely around what we bring back to this table to understand where there has been a lot of working together, advocacy that's supporting our position for Auckland. How is it elevating our status as local government? And at this time, I think that's really important, especially when we have a government that is very patronising to local government and who actually are trying to take off, a lot of our, they're trying to capture a lot of our core functions, and we need to actually be elevating the status of local government. So I hope that I do support that conversation going forward in terms of the value that we're getting out of the organisation. Just to give one example I know about was, say, for example, the work on the Code of Practice. There was a lot of shared knowledge through that process, because a lot of councillors are struggling with Code of Practice work themselves, so they can leverage off our experience in that area and the work that we've got with our officers. And it is something that comes up a lot, like how are we ensuring that we're not overlapping that kind of work. So just a few points that I would like to make in terms of the value of being at conference. And yes, there was a virtual AGM last year, but there wasn't a conference. And I've just come from a conference in Dunedin last week, and I got to go there because I hitchhiked from the airport, paid for my airfares, got myself as a speaker so that I got a reduced registration, used everything I could to try and get there. And the value of actually being in person was so incredible and energising and invigorating, and came away with a whole lot of knowledge. And I think that's for a lot of members who are able to attend, and why local board members put so much at stake in attending, is because there's a huge amount that goes on around the conference, that is an opportunity to learn from senior people there, from having those conversations in the corridor, from, you know, having access to ministers and speakers that you just cannot virtually. And we've seen that with, say, APEC. You know, APEC's happening virtually, but they're confronting all these problems that go with that. You know, there's only a certain limitation that you can have from streaming presentations and asking questions. And two things I just want to highlight from the benefits of conferences, and I hope one of our young elected members is going to speak to this, because of the work of the young elected members that came about through a conference, we have seen a massive increase in young elected members getting elected. And that came from that networking, advocacy through the conference that got that structure up in place, became quite a formidable group, got really visible, and now we're seeing this big increase in people putting themselves forward because they want to join that club. And the same with, I can't speak for Councillor Alf, but I know with Bonita Bigham on National Council, to have Te Maruata as a group now that are able to network at the conference. They have their separate hui and they come together and give themselves support for Māori elected representatives. So that all happens at conference as well. And our own elected members, Māori elected members, have found that to be an incredible networking experience and a source of support. So those are two things I just wanted to really highlight about conferences that weren't obviously captured in the report, but that's why I think it's really important to be able to attend in person. But I really take on board what Councillor Simpson has said is about ensuring that value for money, that we're getting good value. And from that budget of 40,000, I think we can really capitalise it and really leverage it to ensure that we're feeling that we're getting the most from the conference. And I'm glad the point about reporting back came up. I do that religiously. I've reported every single conference I've ever attended in writing, but it's a practice that I see other elected members, you know, it just doesn't happen as a matter of course, especially through local boards. It depends on the discipline of the chair forcing that. I am happy to be a delegate to the AGM and to stay on for the Saturday if there's a vacancy to do that. It is quite an odd process, but happy to be involved. And I've mentioned I'll definitely report back and to go during recess week. So thank you. I do commend this to members. I know it's a difficult one at this difficult financial time, but I think we can get good value for money out of $40,000. Kia ora.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Bill Cashmore.
Thanks, Mr Mayor, and I've always been a bit of a conference sceptic. However, local government New Zealand does provide value and it does provide training at these conferences. Yes, there is some social functions sponsored by other companies, and that's all good and bad. There's the awards ceremony, and Auckland's been, I think every year I've been, received some award in one of those key points. But Des is also correct in the fact that we've got to watch the value for money, and I really encourage the local boards to think long and hard around this. Do you get personal betterment training, job training for being at these conferences? Most definitely. It's the workshops that precede it where you get the gains about learning how to perform your job as a governor better. The big point, and I think the Mayor made it, is that we can't be seen to be arrogant. Yeah, we might be a third of the population and pay 40% of the tax and all the figures that get quoted around this table all the time. But the other councils out there, the other 86, whatever it is, are just as important as us. And their voices are just as important as ours. And we need to sit down and listen to them and also put our views point. I think that's important. The other real get of criticality is the cabinet ministers that attend. And it gives you a chance to, en masse, as local government, challenge the government about what sort of things they are doing. And if you think about the RMA reforms that are coming, where part of it's going to be spatial planning directed from central government back to us and to the other regions of the country, you know, that's going to be a real challenge. So these are some of the options that we have. Yes, we should attend. We are part of New Zealand. We're an important part. Yes, we need to have our voice heard. Yes, the conference makes money, but that also subsidises LGNZ, which you'd otherwise pay in fees to subscribe to LGNZ. So we are part of this. Is New Zealand Inc. And we need to be there. So, Mr Mayor, I support all the recommendations, including Jay. because I think we need to really emphasise that fact around getting value for money. And there's always reports written at the end of these conferences, every time, every year.
Thank you. Councillor Richard Hills.
Thank you, Chair. And yeah, it's a shame that we debate stuff like this for so long and billion-dollar budgets just go past like this, and really important things that I think that are sometimes a waste of money just go on, or when we force Auckland Transport to reconsult 15 times on one issue, costs hundreds of thousands of dollars, and we just, so for me it's like a trip to Blenheim is not some sort of fun jaunt. And credit to yeah, I've never been to Blenheim. And credit to especially Councillor Pipicum and the Deputy Mayor. They give up Fridays, Saturdays, nights to represent us quite often with LGNZ. That it's a lot of work. It's a lot of time away from your families, and it's done when the rest of us are seeing our communities or seeing our family or whatever. So it's frustrating that we're debating this, and now I'm adding to that time. But I guess my thought is, the 2019 conference, which I attended, was on my birthday. There were 600 delegates, and as people have mentioned, we're a third of the country of elected members, and we will be representing 2% of the overall delegates, even though we're a third of the country. A lot of the time in those rooms, there is a lot of Auckland hate and discussion and misinformation, and most of the time I've been spent defending our city in front of a minister, in front of officials from Wellington, in front of others, and lots of people come up, I didn't realise Auckland was doing that. I didn't realise you were doing that on water quality. I didn't realise you had that in Māori outcomes. Can we take your idea? How the heck are you guys doing those stormwater projects? Can I see that? It's all about that two-way communication, and often, unfortunately, it's defending our city from the headlines that are constant around the country about how big and bad we are, and without that, those ministers would be hearing that without our voice in the room, and that is a lot of where the water related policies been coming through government. Climate change. Me personally, I've funded the last young elected members trip I went on. I funded my own flights, went on my own because I thought it was important that we had elected member from this council there. And this year, all the LGNZ policy things, Wayne, I didn't fly down because of emissions and for cost, so I've done that by Zoom. It is extremely difficult to do because you're not listened to, you're missed, you have to kind of interrupt and try and get it in, but it was important not to spend that money and those emissions to be there. If we're debating our membership of LGNZ, that's for another time, but we're a member, and we also, as a city, fought for our own zone. We are now have an Auckland zone. We used to be a Northern Region zone, but we fought to have our own voice in our own zone and our own votes. And if we simply turned around and said to LGNZ a year or so later, no, we're not serious about this, we don't want to be part of it, and we want to minimise it because it's not important, I think that would be a real concern, and it would tell the rest of the country who are there that we don't really care and aren't interested. So I do wish that we would focus on some of the spending in other areas that are millions and millions of dollars that I wish we would focus more deeply on sometimes. So I don't think this is anything but a good thing for our city. If we're debating the membership of LGNZ, maybe we should have a workshop on that and think about that way. But this is part of what we have to do in our role. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
Point of order.
Point of order, Councillor Henderson.
I would love a closure motion. Love one. But we need someone else to speak against the motion first for it to be valid. So can someone say no to the motion and then we'll put the closure motion and get out of here? Thank you. Done.
Right. I think I'll take on board your sentiment. We have spent a long time on this, and it's not a huge sum of money to justify it. I have 4 people left, and if I can just ask those 4 people please to speak briefly and not to repeat the points of others. Councillor Tracy Mulholland.
Thank you, Your Worship. I actually would like my democratic right for my community to speak on this item, so I shall. Now, on the basis of the fact that I have attended these conferences in the past, and it might be amusing for some, but I find it quite important to, in my view, on behalf of the constituents that I represent, to strongly object to so many people attending, so many councillors attending. I'd also like to see if we are going to proceed with Jay, and I actually probably won't be supporting actually a majority of the recommendations, but if it did proceed with Jay, I would like to think that the local boards could work in a cluster method so that we've put that forward, so that it's put forward to them as a consideration that they have a representative from a cluster. We are in difficult times. We are under a lot of pressure, and it is a one-off, unique, I think, position that we are in. So I don't actually agree on the principle of the learnings that I've heard people have had. And I think if we're going to be responsible of having a relationship with central government, then we need to do that in the ways that have already been discussed here. So thanks, Your Worship. It just feels like I'm actually being pressured not to be able to have a fair and reasonable say. Kia ora.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Andrew Dalton.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be quick. I'm not a conference person either, and I've heard what Councillor Simpson has said about our financial constraints, and I think if there is anybody looking at the millions and millions of dollars, it's Councillor Simpson. So it's not just about debating the 40,000, 60,000, actually, it's the principle, and she is looking seriously at all of our spend. So thank you, Councillor Simpson. I mean, I support spending the bare minimum, and I'd be happy to withdraw, but I've listened to what we've talked about. Pippa, you just articulated really, really well. And if we had a dozen Pippas to send, then we'd be absolutely getting our value for money, wouldn't we? Because you do deliver back. I've been attending, I've been nominated to go in my role as the rep for Auckland Council on the LGNZ Governance and Strategy Group. I've attended all of those meetings by Skype since they came in. Other people have gone to Wellington for them. I chose not to because of our financial constraints. And I think there is a time when you have to meet people face to face. So over the Skype, I can see some people I would like to sit down and have a conversation with. I believe it would add value. And that would be a motivator for me to want to go to the conference, along with all the reasons that Pippa has given as well. Absolutely, there should be a report back. When we had only one person go from a local board, the condition was that they reported back on what the value add was and what they could bring back to us as a local board. So it is about finding the balance between the cost of investment and what we get out of it and bring back. I think that the recommendations to send less people is the right recommendation. We do need to be at the table. I think we need to weigh up the cost versus the importance of being at the table. So I will be supporting the recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor John Watson.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. And I disagree a little bit with my my southern cousin from the North Shore. I think a debate such as this is actually important because it's all to do with appearance. So sure, the sums of money might not be that great in the scheme of things, but now more so than ever, it's very important how things look, and not least of which to our ratepayers when we're going out, with various propositions that are, expecting them to make some sort of sacrifice. So I think at this time has been worthwhile. I think Councillor Coombe gave a very inspirational account of some people's approach to conferences and the benefit that comes of them. Almost attempted to try and sign up at myself on the basis of that, but I'm not a conference man. I've never been to one. My wife is, and is kind of a similar ilk as Councillor Coombe, so I appreciate that. I would just say, Mr Mayor, though, in terms of Jay, it might carry a little more conviction, I think, if we weren't sending 6 people ourselves. So I just would say that seems a little contradictory, notwithstanding the very good points that Councillor Stewart made about some of the local board representation, which I agree is a point that does need to be made. So I'm happy to go along with what's been put up, but I do agree with Councillor Simpson. You do have to be very careful, and I certainly, perhaps there's a little way to go on this. I know Councillor Hills gave the very good walking the talk example of himself there, where he's pitched into his own pocket for a conference, and who knows, maybe some of the attendees this time around will do something similar as a gesture. Councillor Coombs always mentioned they're going in the recess break and using up the weekend. That's good. Maybe they might go a little bit further and write out a cheque too, to so that they're contributing as well. Who knows? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And finally, Councillor Shane Henderson.
Thanks, Mayor. Look, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to sound so flippant earlier, but I have to say this debate is probably costing the ratepayer more than attendance at the conference itself. And can we not just get it through? I mean, Jay's all right. Let's just vote for it. Sweet.
Thanks. I'm just taking on board that last comment. We should cut in half our meetings, but when somebody said something, don't say it again, and then we could save a lot of ratepayer money. Look, on a serious note, a lot has been said. Look, I acknowledge Councillor Desley Simpson. She's in charge of getting value for money. She's also chair of the Finance Committee, and she knows as well, if not better than most of us, the financial constraints on the council. But I'm going to support these recommendations because I think, as Councillor Dalton has said, these recommendations find a balance between the need to be careful with ratepayers' expenditure, but also the need to participate and to involve ourselves with our colleagues around the country. Is there a benefit in having a local government New Zealand? I think it's critical. You imagine the government dealing only with 67 separate local authorities and not having a voice for the concerns of local government that can be a unified and a stronger voice. And it is important that we have that voice. If I was to move a resolution that we disband local government New Zealand or cease to involve ourselves in it, I hope you'd all vote against that, because that would be indicating that, okay, it's all right for us, we're 1.7 million, but for all those other smaller councils, why would we want to provide any support for them? Why would we want to be collegial with them? Why would we want to collaborate with them to find some common ground? I think all of those things are absolutely critical. It's important that Auckland be seen to work alongside and in support of our colleagues, and it's important for us not to look like we're trying to dominate those colleagues. That's the fine line that we walk as a council, and it is really important that we just take the rare occasions that we have, and this is a once-a-year occasion, to actually mix and mingle and talk with and support the people that are facing similar problems, albeit on a different scale, to us around the country. I just think it would be an appalling look for us to say, we don't need local government New Zealand, we don't need to provide support to any other council, we'll go it alone. Well, we could go it alone, but what does that say for our collegiality with others? I am probably one of the most frugal mayors there is around the country. If you look at my budget for, whether it's on taxis or plane trips or international trips, and I'm not asking for support and sympathy for that. That's simply my approach. So I'm not one to advocate any extravagant expenditure or to support junkets. But this isn't a junket. And I want to acknowledge, and I'm looking particularly, I guess, at Deputy Mayor Cashmore and Pippacoombe and Richard Hills. I know how much time and effort they put into that. Really is. And that work, I know from feedback I get from others around the country, is respected. I meet on a regular basis by Zoom with other mayors, particularly from the metros, Christchurch, Hamilton and Wellington. And I also know that they value me attending. Another meeting for me is a pain in the arse. But I know they value because we can bring something to the table. We can provide the knowledge of our experience and the expertise we develop from the scale that we've got. That is really appreciated by those people. So it is important that we're part of this. It is equally important that we find the balance of not being extravagant with expenditure of funds. And I think these recommendations find that balance. So I'm going to put the recommendation. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
To the contrary, no.
Against.
So would the councillors who have voted against wish to have their votes recorded?
Yes, please.
Okay, so Councillor Mulholland, Councillor
I'm a yes on A to
Simpson.
I and a no on J.
Yep, okay, and we've got Councillor Sayers, Councillor Stewart. Okay, thank you very much. We now move...
Sorry, Chair. Could I please have my vote recorded against J? Our local boards have already supported this. So,
Okay, it's fine. So there's two votes. I think Councillor Newman, Councillor Hill's against Jay. Right, we now come